basically before this book, I avoided all media stuff. I didn't do any really.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like to just sort of stay in hiding and burrow away and
Yeah, and
I'm
right.
not good at it. And also, I just say like inappropriate things constantly in my actual life. So I've been very nervous about the idea of like long podcasts and things
Yeah,
where
they're
like
terrifying.
it's terrifying. It's
Yeah.
like seems highly likely that I'll say something inappropriate.
I just did a whole podcast and and it was with my friend, and we should have caught up before we did the podcast because I basically texted her and I was like, we can't release that. Like, we need to re-record because that was just like a nice catch up, but I don't want any of that out in the public. I was like way too honest. And now I'm like, I think like I'm with Nellie Bowles, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We're talking about podcasting. I do think you become like highly aware of how things get clipped and misrepresented. So in my mind,
Yes.
I'm always like, oh, that's going to sound horrible, like standing alone. Like on that one line on its own is going to sound way worse than it maybe
Going
is.
through fellow reporters and playing a game of hot or not, like that could really be taken out of context. You know what I mean? It's like
Tell me, I want to know about how now that the book, congratulations, you're a New York Times bestseller. I see. That's amazing and kind of ironic.
propelled by bad reviews. Propelled exclusively by bad reviews. It normally when the mainstream press doesn't like a book, they just ignore it. Which is
Right.
punishment for a book, basically, which is like, not good for sales. But I think that actually their rage and indignation, people were sort of like, huh, wonder why they're so mad. And it did help book sales. I don't know what to say.
Do you think
So
it's
I just have to keep writing bad books.
No, it's a great book. Do you think you're a great writer? Do you think it's because that it's like one of their own? Like this is our family. These are our
Yeah,
people.
kind of. I don't know. I think it is a little bit. But anyway, yeah. Um, I'm both like really pleased about making lists, but then also being like, it doesn't matter. The list doesn't matter. Like that's the old world. But then I'm like,
But it
let's be
does.
real. I'm still excited.
Yeah. Well, and that's the
Um,
thing. It still does matter, even when they kind of exclude like Republican books that don't get on the list. It does affect like where you get booked for speaking events, how much you're getting paid for it does have a downstream effect for
but
things.
what they do to any actual conservative book is they give it a dagger. And they say
Mm.
that the dagger represents that there were bulk sales. So it's sort of like an asterisk next to your name. It's like maybe you were using drugs during that race.
It's
And they
like
say
maybe
it
you were a
represents
dude
bulk
during that race. Sorry.
and they say it represents bulk sales, right? To like be like maybe like some billionaire bought all the books and that's why it sold so well. They do this for any conservative book. You can just look in the list. I did not get a dagger, which indicates to me that they knew it was not. They couldn't quite call it a conservative book. They couldn't quite like put it in that in the conservative book ghetto. But the dagger thing is a scandal that should be exposed at some point.
Yeah. That's
It's really, but also like who gives a shit? And we need to make new lists and like it. There used to be a Wall Street Journal list. There used to be others, and now there's just this one, and it's really annoying. And the Free Press, we now in our Slacks are obsessively talking about making new
book lists.
like
Yeah.
a new bestseller list, self-publishing, like all this stuff, like all this.
Yeah.
There's just like this whole old world of books that hasn't been disrupted as much as I think it can be.
Where do you find yourself now as someone who's like a kind of I don't know. What do you consider yourself? You're still liberal? Are you still considering yourself a liberal?
I'd consider myself liberal, yeah. I
And
mean, like, I tick all the boxes.
yeah.
I'm pro-choice. I like universal healthcare. Like, all the old things that used to define one's politics. Yeah, but I also don't think like I don't think, like, our writers and humorists and whatnot should be super politically aligned with anything.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't I feel sort of politically homeless, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people there, but it's always weird when you're in an election year. I think in the years, like, as someone who's occupied this weird space for a long time, always the election years are like, well, you got to vote for someone. I'm like, no, I don't.
I've been, like, slow rolling RFK into conversations, and
Just to say,
I'm like, "What do you guys think about RFK? Just throwing it out there." And then everyone's like, "Nellie, stop." I'm like, "Okay, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. Bad idea, horrible idea." No, but, I think I sort of liked him until Nicole. The VP
mm,
the VP pick of his seems very, very radical. I mean, like, she's not only, like, suspicious of the vaccine, she wants to, like, ban it of the
oh,
government, and I'm like, "Okay,
I thought it
that's
was just
crazy."
for money. Like, I thought it was just because she had the purse.
No, I think that's why she was chosen. Anyways, whatever.
Right, right. Yeah.
But
That's what I
no,
mean. I
there
thought
is, of
that's why she
course.
was chosen. Like, I thought it was pretty clear it was just someone who could kind of continue to bankroll the run.
Yeah. If he died in office, she would be president.
No, I was talking to a friend who was like doing something. It was something that they were doing for RFK because he's been doing all this like press or whatever. And I was like, do you think he has a chance? He's like, no. I was like, so why are you doing this? It's like, I don't know. It seems like fun.
Sad.
It's like, okay. Glad everybody's just aware that he has no chance, but it is like such a strange time, and I feel like your book really does capture something that everyone would really like to memory hole, like how insane things were. I'm just grateful it's down in print because I do feel like as we approach this election, everyone's like, oh no, it won't be as crazy as 2020 or 2016. I'm like, you guys full on lost your minds. I don't know if you remember. I remember. But there was a lot of craziness happening. How did you go about doing this? Was the book reporting you did that you could never? I guess it was like, was this reporting you did? Were you still at the Times and you couldn't write these stories, or was
Yeah,
it post?
so, the first the Seattle and Chaz, the, like, Antifa zones, basically, the very beginning of the book starts with reporting that I did get through at the Times, and what happened was after that reporting came out, I basically was, like, persona non grata among my
Right.
colleagues. The editors and the bosses were all great, loved this reporting. They were my bosses. I mean, I was like, my bosses were great
Right.
to the most part, for the most part. There were a couple, like, senior leaders who were jackasses for various reasons, but whatever. Um, and one of the editors called Bear a Nazi and, this and that, but my actual boss was great. And it was mostly that once those stories came out, once I started wanting to report on those stories, my colleagues went a little crazy and
Right.
went kind of, just nuts about it, and it was like this movement that I'd been part of that hadn't really, like, gotten in my way ever before, all of a sudden was getting in my way and was making it so I wasn't supposed to be reporting on these really interesting stories, and, then I quit the Times, in part because of the kind of suppression of curiosity and reporting that was starting to happen that then continued for years. Like, I'm so glad I left because
Mhm.
all the most interesting stories of the last 4 years, we weren't allowed to cover.
Yeah.
And then because the free press, then Common Sense was starting, and it was looking really great, and I was like, "This is cool." And so I quit, and I just started doing all the stories that I would have wanted to do for the paper, I just was started doing for the book, and, spent the next couple years kind of chipping away at it. And
Yeah.
I did it slow, I mean, probably too slow, but, I just worked away at different reporting projects and different essays within it, and kind of through having it be slow, got to kind of cover the arc of the revolution in a way.
Mhm.
Because I think now, like you said, we're seeing the memory holing. Now we're seeing people trying to say this never happened. And I think in part, I mean, and people can disagree with this, but I think the revolution largely won. I think our institutions were reshaped by it, and now it doesn't need to be as loud. And the fringe, wackier stuff that was clearly a little overreach, they can kind of like pretend that that stuff didn't happen. We didn't ask for that specifically, but by and large, the ethos of it is woven into our universities, the administrations, our corporate America, our government. Um, and so they can kind of downplay the excesses or the wackinesses.
What would you say was the revolution? Like, was it a cultural revolution? Is it what is it? How would you kind of define it?
I think that as a cultural revolution, I mean, it was an economic. It was
Yeah.
it is a movement that has worked very hard to not be named, to not be labeled. I mean, you see, Wesley has this great. What does he call it again? Gosh, Wesley Yang has an amazing moniker that he came up with that now I'm forgetting it, but I want to give him credit. Anyways, people come up with different monikers
Yeah.
for it, and different ways to try to describe it. But the movement doesn't want to be described, and wokeness, I think, is not. I try to avoid that word, and I don't use it in the book at all because to me, it's kind of a fraught term. Now it's so right wing coded, and at the time, like an early woke, like 2014 woke, I think it was cool, and I think
Yeah.
it was a good idea to some extent. Like I think waking up to the ways in which race plays a role in American life, waking up to historical realities that we wanted to suppress. These are all like noble things, and we should do that. That's nice. But the term woke now is so it's just right wing coded in a way that I think is not as useful, and it doesn't it kind of diminishes it as like a silly thing, whereas I think that the movement is actually very serious and is much more um, than what it presents as. But yeah, it has its resistant name. I call it in the book the new progressive, and what I largely see it as is a movement of progressivism against liberalism. Like,
Right.
I don't think that the conservatives were really rocked by this over the last years. Obviously, they've seen it and been had to experience various parts of it because anyone who has a university in their town or whatever is, like, exposed to various things that are coming out of there. But, um, largely, it was a movement of progressives against liberals.
Mm.
And you saw that play out in a dozen different parts of American life. So, where a liberal and progressive would look at the same problem and come with two very different solutions. Um, a liberal would look at the issue of eighth graders struggling in math and the fact that there's racial differences in who gets into the advanced eighth grade algebra class. And they would say, okay, we should put more funding into elementary school math. We should like look at our curriculum. We should figure out different solutions. We should uh, train our teachers better in teaching math. The progressive says, ban eighth grade algebra. I'm dead serious. That happened in
Oh
San
no,
Francisco,
I
and then
know.
sort of this in all it's spread. That's the idea.
I mean, your book is
It's
basically like in-depth reporting into what we've been covering on Dumpster Fire since
exactly,
2019. It's just like
exactly.
I was like, "Oh, we covered this story. I
Oh, no, it's
remember
old
this."
news. It's
But
old
it's
news.
it's old news,
Completely.
but still weirdly, you covered something that I thought was so important, like in Minneapolis. And what strikes me about a lot of this stuff is that because there hasn't been really any follow-up reporting on the revolution, people don't know that like that part of Lynn Lake, like the Lake Street where the precinct was burned down in Minneapolis, and all those businesses, which were oftentimes people of color, immigrants, their businesses were destroyed. That they're still, because I donated to it, so they're still trying to recover from this. like
Of course they are.
4 years later, and it's so easy to destroy something, and the amount of time it takes to rebuild it is just crazy. And this is where I feel like there just hasn't been enough reporting in general on following up on like where these people are today.
Because the people writing about it at the time are sitting in beautiful, safe neighborhoods. They're sitting in Cobble Hill in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They're enjoying a lovely day, and they're writing, "This is beautiful revolution happening in that town." Kenosha is the looting and the burning of Kenosha is part of just racial justice at work. Then they go and they walk and they go get a cappuccino and they have a nice Sunday. And it's like, I mean, it's this kind of sick pleasure people take in chaos in towns where by and large they don't live, and by and large they've never been and never will be. Um, and to cite another person, Rob Henderson, with the idea of luxury beliefs, he coined it beautifully. He describes how so many of these ideas, like the most famous would be like defund or abolish the police. He describes how that is a perfect example of the luxury belief, because if you live in a wealthy neighborhood or you live in a beautiful apartment building with the doorman, you don't need to think about police and safety.
Yeah.
It's just sort of this quiet part of your life where you don't even like imagine it as a thing. You don't see them, you don't experience crime day to day. But if you live in a lot of other neighborhoods in America, you experience crime and you see
Mhm.
it and it's part of your life and you think about it, and it's a luxury to not be able to think about it. And it's a luxury to pretend like you don't need cops on the streets.
Mhm.
And anyways, Rob's a genius and coined that. But um, yeah, a lot of the politics and the sort of strange pleasure that you would hear in the writing about these last years and the chaos and the anarchy of it comes from people who had no exposure to it. I mean, even with the homeless encampments, let's say,
Yeah.
there's a fetishization of homeless encampments from especially New York media, but East Coast media, let's say. If you go to parks in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, if you walk around, you see encampments everywhere,
Mhm.
large encampments. Parks were taken over entirely by encampments during the height of lockdowns, when they just basically said, "We're not gonna enforce any laws around this." Um, and it was written about as this beautiful sort of march of freedom, like the streets, the like an anti-capitalist movement, as though the park is part of it. It's bizarre and it's on its face, but the people most obsessed with this are people for whom their park is Central Park, which is gorgeous and is
Yeah.
you wouldn't have a tent city there that would last 5 minutes. Like, Manhattan is like a police state compared to how out west is managed, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's there's a sort of sick pleasure that a lot of the commentariat take in, endorsing a chaos and celebrating a chaos that they themselves are completely insulated from.
Yeah. I wonder why
So a
that
lot of the book,
is.
well, there's a lot of reasons, but a lot of the book is, like, documenting a lot of the chaos of the last 4 years and a lot of the funniness and absurdity of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of it is sort of, like, ridiculous, and it's a there's some on the East Coast, but a lot is in the Midwest and in the American West, and,
Yeah.
um, yeah, anyways, that's a dynamic that never ceases to interest me, and but I don't your it's your guess as good as mine as why it is. I have theories, but
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Batya is kind of, good. Batya Ungar Sargon is good about saying that it's a way to kind of transfer the guilt around your class to racial disparities and pointing out like it's a way of doing something without doing anything and not having the focus be on your luxury that you live in. We just talked the other day and I was like, every time I read the New York Times, which is rare, because I can't afford to subscribe to it, but I'm like, who is this for? Because it's clearly not for me, just based on the ads, like, I'm like, I can't afford a Prada bag or literally not one single brand advertised in in the magazine or in the newspaper is anywhere remotely appealing to my where I am in the hierarchy in this
The
country.
magazine is true radical chic.
It's
The New York Times
crazy.
Magazine is like is the radical chic document of our time. It's perfect.
I
I
was
actually love it exactly as is. It's entirely incomprehensible 95% of the time.
I
Like
was telling her,
new words I'm not even familiar
oh
with, and
yeah.
I'm like, which LGBTQ plus is that one? I don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does feel like I just imagine someone reading it on the beach in the Hamptons at their house being like, I'm enlightened, you know? I was telling Batya about this very funny experience I had one day with a mutual friend of ours who does a lot of reporting on homelessness and whatnot. And we went we went to Venice, which felt very like you say, this kind of radical fetishization of like the homeless encampments, to Skid Row, where it's
Mm,
truly systemic and like
mm,
generational poverty. And the makeup is completely different and has expanded over the years. And again, this is not something that gets the attention it probably deserves because it's a
yeah.
quiet expansion of poverty happening. And then went to someone's fund, some very wealthy billionaire who had a fund, and they were like, so tell us about it really felt like, so tell us about what those pores are doing. I mean, it was like, I was like, you've got your little street people out there coming back and like, so how are those pores living? It felt so it was wild. It was such a
That's
wild
so
day.
dark.
Like going from Skid Row to Beverly Hills is wild anyways, but that day
Mm,
was very funny to me because I'm like, this kind of represents that, difference. Like reporters should be reporting on this stuff out in public, not just like personally to these uber wealthy people. Like, should I move my fund out of California? What do you think?
well, you look at also how much spending there is
Yeah,
in homeless services
it's big
and how much
homelessness.
money is spent. Yeah, like, this is the response from the left is always, "Well, we just need to tax more. These people aren't getting services. They're not getting" an enormous amount of money is spent on each homeless person, or technically spent on each homeless person in San Francisco and LA, like, not small amounts. And the the question should be, why isn't this helping? Why aren't they getting the services they need? Why is nothing getting better? Like, it's the answer is always, don't ask that. Don't look at that. Just you should just feel sad, and asking any questions or commenting on it is sort of cruel. And what's wrong with you that you wanna comment on it and ask those questions? You should just sort of enjoy their pain and suffering, and just, see it as part of the city life, and maybe feel a little guilty, but don't get involved. Just vote for more funding to be spent. And it's a really twisted worldview, because if you walk around San Francisco or LA and you're not appalled and upset by what you're seeing, you've lost some essential part of your empathy, of your human empathy.
Yeah.
And it's really strange to me how there's not more rage over the situation, and, like, empathetic rage, and people saying, "This isn't working, this isn't right." And that if you do say that, it's smeared as bigotry, or it's smeared as sort of anti-homeless rage or anti-homeless rhetoric, and it's like, that's not what it is. It's a people should wake up and say, "No one should be dying on the sidewalk." That should not be a part of a wealthy city. Like, California is a rich state.
Mhm.
Uh, Washington State is rich.
Yep.
Like, these are we are in a time of plenty. It's that, well, my dark theory is that basically all the kind of quote unquote homeless spending is siphoned away by corrupt little nonprofits and government schemes, and they, because there's no critical eyes looking at the spending, or very few critical eyes looking at the spending.
They won't even open it up. They won't even
Exactly.
show it.
And when they do, they find that there's
Cronyism and pocketing of all these contractors.
and people making up fake homeless people. They owe a client Mickey Mouse. In a recent audit that happened, there was some amount of the corruption was exposed, and it's like client was Mickey Mouse in a certain, they're making up people to give cash to and all this. It's corrupt.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. I'd be more in favor of just giving homeless people the checks, like just breaking out, here's how much California spends on homeless services. Just if we're not going to be able to fix the corruption, if we're not even going to be able to talk about the corruption, then let's just give people cash and just say, you can't stay on the streets, but here's some cash and you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
That's a better use of money than funding a completely corrupt, self-serving homeless industrial complex that just wants to perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
And very, very effectively smears anyone who questions it
as a bigot,
as an anti-homeless bigot.
Yeah, exactly. I know. It's wild.
Like, because y'all are doing such a great job. Like in San Francisco, COVID deaths were more than fentanyl deaths during the height of COVID. I mean, sorry, let me straighten that out. Fentanyl deaths were higher than COVID deaths during the height of COVID. More people died of fentanyl overdoses. So whatever these services folks are doing, it's clearly not working. It's obviously not working.
Yeah. It is so bad how they manage to make you feel bad for asking questions about where the money's going, as if you're some kind of like you're the bad guy for wanting to know where this is.
Of course, it means you're callous. It means you're uncaring. Why would you talk about that? Why?
Well, yeah.
Why do you need to know more?
We would joke about this a lot too on Dumpster Fire, like the policing of the language around it. Like, oh, you've got to call them on house. I'm like, they're still dying. Whatever you call them, me saying like homeless is not any more dehumanizing than the conditions these people are living in. But it's very convenient that you're pointing the finger at someone for not saying that they're unhoused, instead of looking at where all of this money is going and why all of these like billions of dollars that voters keep voting for are not like seem to be making the problem worse, because it's actually getting worse. It's
I think the language thing, I mean, well, with homeless versus unhoused, homeless to me is much more like evocative and sad, like in a way that makes me more, that I think would draw more sympathy to the situation, like someone who is homeless versus like these sort of sterile words that the movement wants you to use, like unhoused individual. It makes it like a sort of cold and bureaucratic thing,
or
versus
like
the reality, which is someone
experiencing houselessness or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, person experiencing houselessness. Like, like you can use all the fancy words you want, but someone's suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And yeah.
Yeah.
No, the movement loves new words.
Loves
adding words to other words.
There's been this kind of again, I agree with you. Woke has lost its meaning long ago. Although I think it can be used to, when people use it, a lot of people can fill in the blanks for whatever it means for them personally, which is why I don't like that word, even though it is a term that, like you said, can kind of point to a movement that purposely does not want to be defined. So it's useful in that context, but I think people fill in the blanks. And the same can be said for kind of anti-woke. What do you mean by anti-woke? That could be conservative, that could be liberals pushing back against the excesses of progressivism. Do you think what happens to the anti-woke movement of, disaffected liberal, politically home, all the people like you and me. I'm never right on my grammar. All of those of us who are kind of in that center now, who once maybe thought of ourselves as very just obviously liberals, what happens to that now that it seems like there's been some pushback, or does it all snap back if Trump wins? Is the
Well, no, I think it's like a motley crew that emerged around the height of the movement, with unusual bedfellows, right? With
mhm,
people who wouldn't normally be allied against something, all of a sudden finding themselves as allies. Um, I think now that there's more comfort with saying enough is enough on some of the stuff. You see the SAT coming back, right?
mhm,
For years, anyone who argued to bring the SAT back was smeared as a racist
mhm.
very effectively by the most famous journalists in America, most famous pundits in America. That's not working as well anymore. And so I think that the moderates who are notching some wins, um, return to happy liberal spaces and return to sort of their natural state. Um, I don't know.
I mean, I saw that was kind of.
I'm trying to, like, really think of what happens to, like, the curious coalition of normies who emerged and whether they just bifurcate again.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's something I've been thinking about a lot as the election approaches. I think, there's all this talk about Trump kind of winning, and then you're like, will everyone lose their minds again? And kind of, will all of this stuff that's kind of like, is it like a tide that's going to ebb and flow, and will things get a little crazier again if Trump wins and now everybody kind of loses their mind again? But I also think in the interim from 2020 to now, there's been a lot of infrastructure to support, like free press is a great example, to
Yeah.
to
Also,
to
Trump winning,
hold
people
that
losing their minds.
space.
Biden won and people lost their minds.
Yeah,
Like, Biden won and was president in 2020. Like,
yeah,
people still were going crazy.
yeah,
Biden was not the calming force that I think a lot of people hoped he might be.
yeah,
He was not, like, suddenly the voice of reason and moderate politics. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, it's
Yeah, and now even still, it seems like he's creating quite a rift in the progressive versus liberal kind of party.
of course, but I mean, the progressives are never gonna like any politician that's at all popular. Like AOC, the DSA right now is arguing, various caucuses of the DSA are arguing that AOC should be, unendorsed and and that I mean, they will always the progressive branch of the Democratic Party will always be dissatisfied with whoever
Mm,
is popular within the Democratic Party. They don't see themselves as Democrats.
right. What do
And
they see
so
themselves as?
socialists or revolutionaries or
Right.
um
My
but
German cousin always said that about America, though. She said, "You guys don't have a left wing."
I
She's
think we
German.
do.
She's like, "Your
Um
left wing is like our right wing." I'm like, I don't
well,
know about that because your right
I
wing
don't
is
think Biden
ascending.
was this, like, moderating force. I kind of
Yeah.
thought he might be when he came in and that, like, a lot of tempers would fade and things would all, go back to normal, but, like, he wasn't the calming force in American life that I think a lot of us thought he would be,
I
or
didn't think he
the
would
this
be.
voice of reason. I mean,
Yeah.
um, even just looking at lockdowns and the politicization of them and how strange people behaved around that. Biden wasn't exactly a calming, rational force, or looking at, like, the lab leak theory and stuff around that, like, just thinking about COVID,
Yeah.
he hasn't been, like, a voice of reason and, honesty in that.
Yeah, it doesn't
Like,
it doesn't feel like he has any strong, because I'm not sure that he's home, so I don't know, like,
that's a
who's
whole other
running the
conversation.
show, and so you're kinda like, it seems like it's ever shifting because there's no real point of view. So it's like it's very
And, like, Trump is chaos too, don't get me wrong,
total
but
chaos.
I think it's sort of chaos. Both are chaos. One is maybe, uh, Biden's maybe sort of his rhetoric's like a little more relaxing sometimes. He seems, but even now his rhetoric is just stressful because I feel like he's so old, it's stressing me out whenever I see him speak.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not relaxing at all.
I
But in the
mean,
beginning, maybe 4 years ago, I found some of his rhetoric to be a little relaxing.
I did. Yeah. He always stressed, even 4 years ago, he stressed me out because I was like, oh God, this is like, I feel like I don't know what's going to happen in this situation, and it gives me anxiety. Like it's so crazy how normal it is that we are comfortable. We've become like, talk about normalization. It's been normalized that we're not sure our leader can like finish a sentence,
And
or
no one
like
even argues. I mean, it's a
no.
tiny faction who argues that anything but what we see is happening. Like, everyone kind of admits that Biden's on his way towards being senile.
Yeah, I mean, shouldn't that be? Yeah, I'm not optimistic about this coming election at all for many reasons, but I
It's
still,
dark.
it
It
is.
might be. Do you think it's America's worst election? Like, do you think it's our worst options that we've ever had?
I don't know, probably, but
We need a history buff.
I don't
We need
know.
someone to go
Yeah,
really far back.
somebody would. I'm sure someone would say no. It's been much worse. I definitely probably in my lifetime. I think
Well, yeah, for sure in our
in my lifetime,
lifetimes.
and it's mostly just the aging, and I don't know. It's not.
It's dismal.
It is dismal. I don't think it inspires much excitement or. Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange because I reading your book now. Are we after the revolution, or is the revolution just like a submarine waiting to reemerge? Is it just being quiet? I'm not sure if like we see this. It was that something that we just lived through in 2020 around then, and now, like you said, it's just quietly been assimilated. It's hard to tell because does it actually get worse if Trump wins? And
Yeah.
then we
Well,
see,
okay, 2020 was the explosive moment, but it's been unfolding for the last 4 years.
right,
Like, we saw, and the book kind of goes from, you got Chaz and Chop in Seattle, then you have the BLM corruption, which, much like the homeless industrial complex corruption, that in 2021, 2022 was, you were, it was very risky to talk about it and report on it because, Black Lives Matter was supposed to be able to raise money without any oversight,
right,
anyone talking about where they were spending the money. Then, you had to pivot to trans issues, which now are becoming a little less verboten, but kind of the movement with the speed of viral news, with the speed of virality, the movement kind of virally shifted
right,
and became all about trans lives matter, trans issues, um, pediatric gender transition defense. Like, all of this stuff became like the forefront of it. Um, and that was in 2022, 2023. And then, I mean, so I don't think this is a thing that just happened 4 years ago and we are still processing it. I think we have been over the last 4 years in a sort of um, continuous cultural revolution
right.
that again has resisted a name, has resisted description, but has changed our institutions in deep fundamental ways. You can't pretend it's not a revolution when you have biological males competing against biological females in sports teams around the country. And that's just a thing that's happening now. And we kind of can't talk about it, can't debate it. To discuss it is to make yourself radioactive.
Yeah,
When eh, yeah. And we're basically told that there's no change happening. There was no revolution, that the movement has no name, that it's always been thus. And it's like, well, feels like something changed.
yeah.
Feels like something's still changing a little bit. And
Would they argue
yeah,
it's just progress though?
that is how it's argued. And I think, I mean, I've thought about that a lot. The idea of, is this just the movement of progress? And the last couple years with these different kind of manifestations? Are we just seeing progress? When you look at history and you look at how change was actually won for someone like me, let's say, who benefited enormously from progress, benefited enormously. I'm a woman who has a checking account, who votes, who married another woman. I mean, the gay stuff is more relevant now because it's like more recent. But even the fact that we're women doing professional things and with bank accounts is like
Yeah.
unbelievable. People
And
fought really hard for
homes.
that, right?
Yeah.
And homes
Yeah.
and the freedom to divorce and marry, whatever we want to do. These are incredible achievements. I don't think that the march of progress is linear, and I don't think that that it's obvious what the progress is. So, for example, with gay marriage, Andrew Sullivan, with his vision of gay marriage as a normalizing, almost conservative move for the gay movement, he was smeared at the time. He was
Yeah.
seen as like a fascist within the gay movement. That was not where the cool kids of the gay movement wanted to go at all. Marriage was heteronormative.
Yeah.
Marriage was not the right thing to fight for. Andrew Sullivan was smeared for it. And so if you were alive right then, if you were working not alive, if you were working right then as a writer or whatever, you wouldn't consider Andrew Sullivan a progressive and gay marriage progressive. Yet now we consider it progress. So I don't think it's always obvious what
Mm.
progress is. And if you tell me now that progress is basically saying we're not going to have sports categories for biological females, I don't know that that's necessarily progress. And I'm not sure that the people arguing for that can claim um, ownership over the idea of progress and claim that it's always obvious because it's not.
I think about this stuff too much.
Well, you and me both.
Yeah.
Because we all want the same things. We all want a more equal society. We all want, it- like, none of us want homeless people suffering on the streets. None of us want we all want an empathetic society.
And I think it's because we're people who have been accused hundreds of times, if not thousands, of being on the wrong side of history. So, as someone who was from the left pushing back against some of what I saw were these excesses, it was like I questioned myself a lot. Am I someone who's just maintaining the status quo and not aware of it? Am I someone who's like on the wrong side of history on this? An old person just saying, get off my lawn, all of those images, a good liberal, whatever. I mean, so many things that and not really being sure.
No, because it can be destabilizing.
And
And
I can't think of a time. I'm having a hard time right now thinking of an example of anything parallel where there was progress and then they were like, "Oh, we need to take that back." I'm just struggling to think of other than kind of like panics. There I could think of some moral panics or some of these like the satanic panic or something like that where they like took it back and said, oh, maybe everyone wasn't a Satanist or maybe everybody wasn't molested by their parents or whatever. These are kind of panics that have occurred that we've looked back on.
you can just look at the most recent one. Like, just look at the SAT and the
Right.
movement to abolish the SAT. That's a really clean one, and it's just happened right now. So we were told that progress is abolishing the SAT, and that we should judge that elite colleges should judge students based on extracurriculars, essays, and teacher evaluations. And then that would be more just and more equitable.
Yeah.
Oh, and their grades, of course. Well, it turns out that that's not more just and equitable, and
Mhm.
that doesn't help poor kids, and it doesn't help kids from minority backgrounds, and it doesn't help um, the people that it says it's helping. And w- people really knew that ahead of time, but whatever. I mean, they ignored all the research. But it turns out that extracurriculars are something that can be gamed extremely well by rich people, and that student that letters of recommendation from teachers are a lot better if that teacher only has 12 kids in their class.
Mhm.
And all of this stuff that's so intuitive and obvious. And so the movement that said progress means abolishing the SAT was wrong. And progress does not mean abolishing the SAT. And the SAT has been brought back in most of the schools that abandoned it, and with the message that actually we were wrong. And the schools have
Yeah.
put out statements highlighting all the studies, much of which were done before this whole thing happened, much of which
Mhm.
was information that was known. But um, I think you can look at that and say, it's okay to say a group of people who claim the flag of progress are actually doing something regressive.
Right.
And history will very quickly forget that that ever happened. You know, it won't be remembered as a moment. It's a small moment, and maybe the SAT shouldn't be remembered, but I think there's a lot of things like that that happen along the way towards what we think of as progress, us getting the right to vote, me getting the right to marry.
Mhm.
And the Andrew Sullivan gay marriage debate, I think about all the time. Like, there was a very influential, very smart, savvy, chic group of gay, anti-gay marriage fighters. And it was okay, and that Andrew Sullivan pushed against them and said, "We actually want this."
Right.
And thank God he did. And now everyone pretends like that was always cool. Like that
Right.
was always the fight. And it wasn't. That's a lie.
Right.
And
Yeah. I
so
think we're
I
seeing
owe
it
a
with the
lot of my
gender
life to.
stuff in Europe too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I owe a lot of my life to political progressivism, of course. But it wasn't always obvious what political progressivism was in the moments when it was happening.
Mhm.
Some
Yeah.
things like the right to vote, of course, that is a little more clear cut.
Yeah. I'll talk to younger family members and Gen Z and, the pronoun stuff. I kind of really cared about it. Do what you want, but don't like force it on, it gets to the part where if it's being enforced and people are being fired, I have a lot more of an issue with it. And then I talk to like the younger people and they're like, they kind of get it. They know the language. It's all in their ether. It's their zeitgeist. It's just like the way things are. It's the way they all talk to each other on TikTok. And I'm like, maybe I'm just old. Maybe some of it might just be that I'm old. And
I think pronouns and the sort of playfulness around gender, that I think it's cool. Like all the different ways people are thinking about gender and how to construct it and play around and identify in this or that way and how flexible it is. And um, I think it's kind of fun. To me, the where I sort of become the Andrew Sullivan in the whatever room is when you talk about throwing the weight of the American medical establishment into the conversation.
right,
And you say, "Oh, this kind of interesting, playful, youthful thing around gender," which maybe they grew up and keep playing around gender, and that's great. Um, that all of a sudden we need to take it very seriously, and these 8-year-olds are making very clear statements about who they are and what they want, and we should medicalize it and them. And that's where I'm like, I actually don't know if that's progress.
right,
If that's the metric we're talking about. Like, I don't know that reifying gender stereotypes and saying a little boy who kind of acts feminine, and plays around with dresses is actually a girl,
right.
'cause those are girl things, right? And it's like, I mean, this is now many a lesbian before me has made this argument, but the idea of taking a gender conforming young woman, like I was myself, and saying, "Actually, she's playing with trucks. She has a voice that's quite low." I was interested in girls when I turned 14. As soon as I went through puberty, I knew I was gay.
Yeah,
And and if someone had come and said to me, "You might be a boy. Those things are boy things. Those are boy traits." I would have latched onto that
yeah,
and been like, "That's exactly right. That solves it. That explains it." And it reifies gender. Instead, I can say, "I'm a woman, and being a woman is amazing and expansive, and it means I'm wearing I'm wearing jean overalls and a t-shirt, and like I don't need to be wearing a frou-frou dress. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous idea of womanhood." And so I think a lot of that movement has reified gender stereotypes in a way that is wildly conservative. Now, for in adults should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies and have whatever surgeries they want, it's great. And should be respected. And actually, the movement that has been fighting so hard around pediatric gender transitions would be there's a lot of space to fight for adult trans people to be safe in the workplace, to be
Yeah.
respected, to not be fired for being trans, things such as that. Things that are like tangible, practical things for, adults. Anyways,
Yeah. Can
but yeah, just
you
talking about the March of Progress. I don't think it's progressive to tell gender dysphoric little kids that they're necessarily in the wrong bodies.
Yeah, I wonder too, like your experience was as both of us kind of were pregnant during the height of really a lot of the gender stuff. Like I went to a lot of birth classes where they called us birthing persons, and it felt I was like, "Ah!" Like online, of course, because we were not allowed to be in person. How much I found it
Being a birthing person in the birthing people.
I found it challenging to, disentangle how my views were evolving from becoming a mom. It was like, how much of this is becoming a mom? How much of this is also getting just older? How much of this is being kind of, as I've said publicly before, like radicalized by becoming a parent? Because now some of this stuff that I could comment on Dumpster Fire, like the cool Gen Xer that I was, being like, haha, you guys have to deal with this weird gender stuff in your schools. Suddenly now I'm like, oh shit, now I have to worry about what they're teaching my kid in school. And it becomes a lot more like, now I've got to fight this fight instead of just kind of mocking the people who fight it from the sidelines, or acknowledging that it's a fight, but not having any, like I've said, I have literal skin in the game now. What are your feelings about that as someone who's become a
Is
mom?
now a mom.
Yeah.
As a mother.
As a mother.
As a soon-to-be double mother.
As to
I'm so obscenely pregnant right now, it's, like, not right.
Oh, it's so fun,
I think
though.
about this a lot. I mean, I think I would like to be the one to teach our children about sex and gender. I don't think it's necessary for a preschool or kindergarten teacher to take on that role. Now, um
It's
8th grade
weird.
health, teach about sex and using condoms, like, great, whatever. Like, but, like, the obsessive focus with bringing that into the education of very young children, I think
It's
is a
creepy
little
and weird.
bit. Yeah, it's a little creepy, and it also just, like, I can handle that, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Like, that we can take care of that in our house,
Yeah.
and I think that there's a lot of people who feel that way for a lot of different reasons, all of which are valid and fair. Like, I think
Mhm.
there's conservative Christians and Muslim families and lots of groups who have really strong feelings about this and want to teach their kids how they want to teach their kids, and I wouldn't teach our kids the same as those families would, but that's okay. Like, I think basically we shouldn't try to come up with some agreed upon way in which our public schools are going to teach 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds about gender identity and sexual identity and sexual orientation, because I think it's, first of all, an impossible task to get all of the diverse American families to agree to some sort of curriculum on that.
Yeah.
And also, just weird.
Yeah.
The obsessive focus with bringing gender and sexual orientation conversations into classrooms for 5-year-olds. Because
But it's
think about if another
everywhere.
group was in power, think about if it wasn't progressives in power, if it was conservatives. I would feel very uncomfortable with a evangelical Christian doctrine leading the conversation around sexual orientation for our kids.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't like that at all. It would be very
Right.
bad for my family. And so
Right.
I the sort of far left doctrine that currently reigns our schools today, or runs the schools today, might be slightly closer to where I would be, might be, a little less different than what I would teach, but still it's different enough. And I think it's like, why is this a conversation? Just teach the
Yeah.
alphabet.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's everywhere. Like I mean, it's hard to find a school where it is not. You have to actively seek it out, and it's not easy. And so many people, even in Texas, where I am, it's not. It's like everywhere. I mean, I have friends in Indiana and all kinds of these flyover states, and they are wrestling with it as well. So I don't
Like
know. I don't know how you get that out of the schools. I don't know how it got in. Like, I haven't gone full James Lindsay sinister,
creepy.
but
No, but I think
I
there's
get
something
it.
creepy about the obsession with it, like, that
Yeah.
it's so important to make that such an essential part of the first grade curriculum.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Like, I my teachers didn't talk about that in first grade, and I turned out just fine and gay. Like,
My teachers
we
didn't
don't
talk about any of that, and they didn't talk about their personal lives. I didn't know what they were doing. Like I thought of them as, like the
no, I
teacher and
think the stuff
Snoopy.
the backlash to it that you see in places like Florida, which the Don't Say Gay bill and the conversation around that, like, it was the media is not being honest
No.
about what it's not a Don't Say Gay bill, whatever. But I think the backlash to it where someone's scared to say who they're married to or scared to have a family photo on their desk, that's obviously nuts, and that's obviously also bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the backlash is just as clumsy and excessive often as the movement that brought on the backlash.
Yeah, it's like same with the gender stuff where somebody's really good at sports and now you've got these like dads who are like, I need to see their genitalia. Like I don't want
exactly.
that either.
Like that's creepy and sick. Like it's
like,
yeah.
I've never
Holding
really
our position, holding on to like sanity and not going tribal and not going for either of these really cruel. The extremes can be quite empathyless in a lot of ways. And yeah, no, it's not the easiest.
Yeah, I find that I don't know what I'm going to do with like first school, and like it will be ironic if my kid ends up in like a Catholic school, which I went to and was very much like, no, my kid's not going to be taught all that weird guilt stuff around sex. I'm like, well, at least she might not be taught that she can be a boy. It's so weird. It's such a weird. There feels like, and I was thinking about this earlier
But
when
it's
you were
not even that they're teaching she can be a boy, it's that they're teaching because if she grows up and is 21 and wants to go by
I would
he,
say
him,
like
like
25 because even I know
okay,
so many detransitioners who transitioned of age and regret it. Like my therapist would argue you shouldn't be able to do that until your whole entire prefrontal cortex is developed at 25. She's
but
like, you can't say that they know what they're doing.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I I it's not even that you can be a boy is the thing that it's the idea of, like, if you feel uncomfortable in your body, this is the likely answer.
Yeah.
That to me is, like, just such an alarming argument. It's
Yeah.
like most children at different stages of growth feel uncomfortable in their bodies, and the first answer can't be lifetime medicalization and lifetime hooked up to the American medical system. Like,
I
that can't
wonder.
be the first answer that teachers are presenting in a classroom.
Yeah,
That to me, that's bonkers.
it's so default though. I mean, I wonder how much of it too is just like part of our technological advance. Like so much of the progress that we are grappling with, the forward motion of this stuff feels like technology that is out of our control and out of our hands. And kids can't even handle being bored. So it's not surprising to me that they can't handle being uncomfortable in their bodies in puberty because the entire generation we're talking about has always had something to alleviate their even like my freaking I see it even with our kid because my parents and boomers and whatnot will be like, "What's the sound machine?" You know, like you guys in here, you listen to the sound of us fighting when you fell asleep. Like, what are you guys? What's all this? What's all this noise makers and the darkness that they need? Kids back in our day slept in a drawer with some blankets, and it's kind of true. I don't know if that's progress or not, that my kid sleeps in a very comfortable, soothing environment.
I know. I was looking into like diaper wipe warmers,
Oh, yeah,
and I
they're
was
kind of
like,
bullshit.
is this like babying our baby too much? Like, I was like, do I need the diaper wipes to be warm? I might like warm diaper wipes.
Here's the argument for them. You and I should just start like
This
a mommy
a parenting
review. Yeah.
podcast. I'm sure all your podcast listeners want to hear us talking about diaper wiper warmers.
You would be surprised. My audience bought me my entire registry. They would love to hear about this. And there was a big debate about the diaper warmer. And
Really?
yes, because a lot of people swear by it because it doesn't really jar the child for those late night feedings or
Of
changings.
course.
Because you get a cold
I
wipe
get
on your
that.
bum and you're gonna be like, wah. And it
Yeah.
wakes them up, and if you have to change them in the middle of the night. We got one and hated it because it dried out all the wipes. We didn't use it enough. So the wipes would get like
dried the
super
wipes.
extra dry, and then we couldn't use it, and we were like, okay, we're kind of in the like, this is a little bit garbage, although it was nice. And again, you think these phases are gonna last way longer than they last. Like the midnight
I know
changing diaper
babyhood lasts for
phase,
like a minute.
it's like 3 months, you know, with they're
Yeah.
like, you're in that newborn bubble when that might matter, and then you're out of it, and like then you're wondering if they're still alive because they slept longer, and you're like, why didn't I wake up? It all happened so fast. So yeah, that was it. I think there's but again, yeah, do you need all that crap? Because there's now like a minimalist. There's a backlash to all this, obviously, especially like on Instagram. The moms will be like, I use like what we had. There were 5 of us, and I remember we used the like cloth diapers. I have no idea how my mom washed those things, but we definitely. I mean, maybe not for the younger ones, but they were around when I was growing up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I thought I would be a cloth diaper person. I did.
Yeah, we all think we'll be like a cloth diaper, no screen time parent.
I thought I would
And then
be
your
cloth,
child is
but
like swiping away notifications while they talk
Great
to
guys.
grandma.
I think it's really cool when someone does cloth diapers. I really respect it. I respect moms who like go hard. Like even as I am, I would say probably more of a lazy mom. When I hear of or meet a mom who's like going hard, like cloth diapers or like even elimination communication, I think some women have a reaction of like, that's annoying, or like, that's like, why are you judging me? And I'm just like, it's inspiring. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Not me, but I love that for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love it for the moms. I don't think they're working. I think that's like
No, but like Ballerina Farm, when I see a Mormon with like 10 kids, I'm like, that's beautiful. You do you.
Yeah, I wish I was independently wealthy so I could live like that too.
Well, that's what makes Ballerina Farm so good. Okay, wait, for listeners, Ballerina Farm is an Instagram account run by a woman who's, I don't know her name other than I call her Ballerina Farm, but she is this gorgeous blonde influencer married to a man who is the
Heir
son
to
of the founder of
JetBlue or
JetBlue,
something.
the heir to JetBlue, and they live on a farm, and they're always doing videos of them like out like milking their goats or whatever, milking the chickens, and the beauty of it is that she's an heiress. The beauty of it is that it's fake, because an actual farming family with that many kids, the videos would be them like stressed out at night, adding up their bills. Like it would be like, it would be much
Anyone.
more stressful. Every new child would be like a little more stressed, and they're like, but you can watch Ballerina Farm videos and you just know it's relaxed.
My
'Cause it's fake.
Instagram is unhinged, my algorithm, because I am unhinged. It is a reflection of how unhinged I am. It's like I have like homesteading videos that I save, but I'm like, can you guys actually read like a Little House on the Prairie or anything? I mean, life was not easy. They
No,
make
no,
it look
fake homesteading is the best, though. I don't
my
wanna see real homesteading. Real homesteading is
You're
filthy.
not
It's
wearing
like
a sundress when you're
no,
homesteading, by the way.
exactly, they're filthy, the kids are filthy, you think the mom's hot in real homesteading? No.
Have you
No.
seen that woman that I am obsessed with her just because it is like I'm like, this has to be a parody. This can't be real. And she's another one kind of like Ballerina Farm, but I think she's clearly like in a city. And I can't remember her name. Jaron just dies laughing. He's like, this cannot be real, Bridget. This has to be a parody. I'm like, oh no, I think it's real. But she's like, the kids were hungry, so I thought I'd make them their fresh a grilled cheese. And so I just baked the bread. And everyone in the comments is like, your fucking kids are starving. How long did it take you to make this
I just baked the
fucking
bread.
grilled cheese?
Wait, that is so funny.
She makes her own cheese. It's like, I have to find it. It is, and I am obsessed with this woman. I'm like, I feel like she's trolling everyone. Like, this can't be real. Like, my kids were really hungry, so I thought I'd make them a grilled cheese from literal scratch.
Good for her.
Where are your kids when you're doing all this, by the way? She just had another baby too. Oh my gosh, what the heck is her name? I know. It is, and she just always looked gorgeous in these like amazing dresses, baking. I make bread regularly for my family because I do like doing that. And I am a disaster. Like, this woman does not have 1 inch of like flour or anything on her. Jaron will come in and I will be covered from head to toe in flour. He's like, it's all over the counter. Hers is just like immaculate. It's amazing. I follow this other influencer that I love, and she's like one of those home birth people. So I watched her kind of like giving birth in a tub video, which was going into pregnancy. You kind of, again, you want to think you're going to be the like cloth diaper, I'm going to have birth in a tub kind of woman. And I was like, this child came out of the sunroof, as Mary Harrington calls it. Just like scheduled that shit. Not exactly labor. Yeah.
I thought about doing a home birth for like a second with our daughter and with this little one too. But both times I was like, I don't have time for a hobby right now.
Yeah.
And it involves so many meetings with doulas.
It's so expensive.
It's just it has to be a real interest of yours and a real hobby. But I think it's cool as hell. And I think it's better, probably. And I wish I was a better person.
But this is the problem with this, is that it does make, not everyone, but there is that, like, you kind of just joked, like, I wish I was a better person. That's what whether or not they realize that's the content they're putting out, there is that vibe of like, you're not as good as me. Especially with the influencers.
But I think, of course, but I think it's inspiring. Like, I see it as like, it's like someone with a very beautiful home. Like, looking at very beautiful homes online, I love that. Even as my home's a mess or whatever, I'm never gonna have those bright colored fabrics all perfectly patterned like that, and oh my god.
It's aspirational.
It's aspirational. It brings me pleasure, actually. It does. It does. Home birth, I don't watch home birth videos, but I'm inspired by them.
I watch her go hard in the comments on people though.
I liked the co-sleeping movement.
Oh, the co-sleeping, yeah. We did that for a minute.
I kept our daughter right real tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then we sleep trained her, and I felt really good about that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. People have to kind of do what's good for them, I think. That's where I fall. Like, do whatever works, because it's a shit show. That's my parenting advice.
I agree.
It's a shit show out there.
If
What is your? Yeah, it's funny though. I'm gonna text you this woman. I have to find her now. I can't remember her name, but it is. I don't even know how it's real, but she's huge, massive. People love to hate her,
I
and now
remember
there's
the
all these
Wesley
what?
wait, I remember the Wesley thing. It's the successor ideology. That's what Wesley argues. The successor ideology,
And how does
which
that?
I don't know. It's not as evocative to me as whatever. It's hard to find a good name. Anyways, sorry.
I was watching South Park last night and I thought about how they perfectly kind of exemplified luxury beliefs in their episode because the funniest part about the episode was that if you couldn't afford Ozempic, you got prescribed Lizzo.
I love Lizzo.
No, I know.
I should leave Lizzo alone.
Yeah, but she's a
what is it?
target.
Oh God, I gotta watch this. I love South Park.
But it's basic. I feel like it was okay. But basically, that part was kind of funny because it was like they essentially say like this is it's Ozempic for the rich and body positivity for the poor. And I was like, that's really a luxury belief.
That's really funny. I know everyone's gotten so skinny. I just saw a picture of Guy Fieri.
No, he got skinny too.
Google Guy Fieri. Skinny.
No.
I'm not kidding. Skinny. I love him.
I would go to
I'm not sure if I like him.
into a diabetic coma with him.
I know.
No, hold on. I'm Googling it right this second. I have to see. Guy Fieri skinny. No. I mean, good. Oh, God. It's the first thing that comes up. Weight loss. What? This is like Cartman getting skinny.
Watching your reaction to skinny Guy Fieri is really fun for me.
He looks so strange.
I know, he looks so strange. It looks like a weird cartoon version of the old Guy Fieri that we knew and loved.
Everyone, and they were making fun of this in South Park, how everyone says it's Pilates and like hiking.
It's never Pilates.
That's what he says.
Just say it's Ozempic. There's no shame in it.
What's your biggest defect of character?
Oh. Wait, hold on. Let me get back into the screen. Okay. My biggest, it's like a job interview question you're supposed to answer. I work too hard sometimes. My biggest defect
I just care too much.
I can be very selfish. I can forget to listen to other people. I mean, being fully honest, like, yeah, I can think about my own pleasure too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's kind of like a common one. What's like a weird defect?
I mean, that's good. That's a good answer. It's honest. I think writers too just inherently struggle with that.
Yeah, like sometimes Bear will ask me to help edit something or look at something, and if my byline's not on a piece, I'm sort of like lazier with it. I'm like, oh, it's great, looks good. Like I changed this sentence and then like good to go. And Bear's like, okay, like give it an edit though, maybe if you have time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, don't have time, sorry. And I can definitely be like vain about my byline, vain about my writing, and selfish with my time.
Yeah, I had a funny. I definitely like really relate to the Joan Didion writer. All writers are selling people out too. I had this like dark, and also the comedian in me. Just Jaron and I had this. I don't know. I think I let him a little bit like too much into my head, where I was like talking about something, and then I kind of took him through like my whole thought process, and he's like, and being the therapist, he's like, well, and where did you land on? And I was like, well, I kind of ended on it would make a good story, and he was like, the look of disgust.
Yeah.
He was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I could see, because it was like a pretty dark thing. And he's like, wow, okay. I was like, I feel like I let you do into my head. Like, I'm sorry, writers. It really made me think of that line. All
It's a
writers
great
are
line.
always selling someone out. What's your biggest asset?
I can be quite obsessive, and I managed to, like, quite like, when I research something, I can become really obsessed with it, or
Hmm.
I've channeled a kind of obsessive nature well, I think. Um,
Like a
and,
dog
like,
with a bone.
yeah, a little bit, and
Yeah.
especially when I think so much of, like, I growing up had a lot of trouble with authority figures and always had trouble being, like, respectful in school and, like, things like that, and I think what kicked me off with the book and with a lot of the reporting that I've done is basically, like, people pretending to be authority figures saying, "You can't do this," or, "Don't look at that," or
Yeah.
what have you, and a little bit of rebelliousness mixed with, like, a very obsessive nature, I then can't not think about that. I then, like, become obsessed with it, and it's all I can, because I was told I wasn't able to, and it's like I'm 12 years old again, and my parents are telling me something, and I'm saying that's bullshit,
Yeah.
and that has kind of hounded me as an attitude my whole life, and also is, um, a good asset in terms of, like, building a new thing and writing about things that are somewhat controversial or whatever. So yes.
Are you working on another book?
Not yet. Right now, mostly focused on the column, and then, for listeners,
That
I write
column
a
seems like a
weekly.
lot of work. It stresses me out.
A lot of work. For listeners, I
It
write a
does seem like a
weekly
lot of
column on
work.
the Free Press, and then, I'm starting I need to really actually fully launch our Free Press Health column, and then after maternity leave, um I would like to write another book. I think I wanna write, like, maybe something a little bit fiction, um, maybe, like, fiction plus reporting, I'm not sure.
What's your health column?
We're working on a free press health concept, which I did one column for it to kind of announce it and get feedback, and, it will explore the news around health in the same way that TGIF explores the news around politics and makes fun of this or that. I think there's a lot of space in the world of health right now
Mhm.
for sensible, smart, non-doctrinaire writing.
Mhm.
And you have basically left-wing media, like, let's say NPR, that basically puts your personal health as the lowest priority in their
Right.
reporting. So they would never say, eat organic fruits and vegetables and grass-fed beef, because to say eating grass-fed beef is to say that we shouldn't think first about the environment and about water and about air quality, and that, like, you should think about all those other things, and you shouldn't eat beef, you should eat just tofu and probably just crickets, and, like, your health is the lowest priority, and they want you to put it as your lowest priority. Whereas then you have the right-wing media who's, like, gets a little conspiratorial sometimes with health
Right.
coverage. And I think there's a lot of space in the middle to do reasonable, smart, rational health coverage, and to gather together what we're already seeing, which is really brilliant stuff in the middle.
Mhm.
Like, there's a reason why Huberman is so popular, and Peter Attia, and all of these independent thinkers and writers on health, because they are the only group who's offering kind of individual focused health and science news.
Yeah.
Also, our science coverage, I mean, you look at all the fraud in science and medical research right now. You look at the fraud at Dana-Farber, you look at the fraud and what's happening, and the mainstream/left media basically doesn't want to touch it, or touches it only after it's been thoroughly reported by our little world of weirdos and independents and all of this, and then finally will deign to look at what's going on. Because it's a culture of very much respecting those institutions and respecting the Stanford president's research, and it's very wild to think that these people might be, these like very respected medical doctors might be doing fraud.
Right.
And we're not supposed to do that. I think especially after COVID, there's a sort of just step in line, just don't question that a doctor knows best. Don't, which to the old left, to like the Berkeley left of my childhood, would have been crazy
Yeah.
to think that they would be that biomedical companies would and whatever sort of corporate medical interests say it has to be taken as gospel. Anyways, I can rant about that for forever, but yeah, I think there's a ton of space for smart writing in the health and science world right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's because the left is just saying step in line and the media doesn't want to cover it. It does open up more and more people to having nowhere to turn but the conspiratorial thinking.
Exactly.
So that
And then you have
in
the
that
right-wing media.
vacuum.
The right-wing media is feeding you often straight up conspiracies on different health things, and like the COVID vaccine being the perfect example, where it's like there are side effects to the vaccine, those are real. It also is very beneficial in protecting against COVID. That's real. And COVID is really quite often very bad to get, especially if you're older. Like these are all true things, and it's okay to acknowledge all of them. And in my case, to then happily get the vaccine. And I think that the right-wing media basically only wanted to look at the side effects, only wanted to look at the this or that, and kind of downplayed the protectiveness of it. Like that being a great example of the silliness of both sides of reporting on something.
My favorite is like the people who think that you get it if like for the shedding of it.
Oh, I mean, but the reason
I
the
know some.
conspiracies could rise is because the mainstream media wanted to downplay every side effect, every
Yeah.
every complication, and instead of just coming from a place of confidence and saying, there's a little bit of complication here. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. And COVID is a bitch. So you don't want to get it. You don't want to get it unvaccinated. Like that a normal adult can handle all of that information.
Yeah. I really appreciated my doctor when I was pregnant because I was like, should I get it? Shouldn't I? And he was like, there's a lot we know and there's a lot we don't know. And I'll let you make that decision.
I love that.
And he did. I didn't get it because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to. But he was very honest about
that.
Things. You know, he felt, and I respected that he could admit that there was still a lot they didn't know. It was so early. It was like 2022, the end of 2021. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. And people called me a right-wing conspiracy theorist for saying that my period was messed up from the vaccine, and now it's like open truth. You know, now they're like, oh.
Exactly. And this is why everyone lost faith in the sort of, it's a perfect example of both sides not telling the full story about a thing. And everyone being losing because of it.
I love your TGIF.
Thank you.
I love you, and I love your writing. I just love your writing. Like I'm just a huge fan of your writing. It's just it's a pleasurable reading experience. And I've read a lot of books in the past few years doing this podcast.
I bet you have.
It was nice to read a reflection. I know that people kind of say, well, people don't, like they're not necessarily the most popular books because everybody wants an answer about a problem, you know, and it's like, and I make this joke. I'm like, if I could, I could just read some of the titles of, it's like The End of Democracy, Democracy is Dying, The Death of the West, like the same book.
Yeah, the critique I've gotten from the left and the right to some extent is like, the book doesn't offer answers or solutions or tangible things.
You're
And I'm
lucky
like,
you got
of
to
course
write
it
it.
doesn't. I don't have answers or solutions. I'm describing a thing. I'm having a little fun. And it's up to you, the reader. And it's I there's not like a policy prescription at the end of the book or some kind of argument of like vote for this person or vote for
I
that
know.
person.
This
And
is
that
what
people want
this is
that
why I
simplicity.
haven't written a book yet, because every publisher wants this from me. And I'm like, no, the real story is how an idiot without a college degree ended up caught in the crossfire of the culture wars. That is funny.
Yeah.
People want to hear that story because everybody is their own little accidental media, like everybody's kind of been through this, but they're like, no, we want, you know, like they want something to be like, A, to figure out how to promote you, and B, to figure out like, you know, I'm not going to be like, and therefore vote for Trump.
Exactly. No, everyone wants
I don't
things
care
to be
how people
simple.
vote. That's the problem. Somebody in my subscriber community was like, I'm just going to be pro-Trump in here until I get kicked out. I'm like, eventually you're going to realize I literally don't care how you vote. Like I actually don't care. Especially this election. Imagine caring how someone voted in this election.
This one is really a depressing one.
Oh no, it's gonna be. I was saying
I
just
feel
on
so
Dumpster
dark
Fire this
about it.
week.
I really
I do
do.
too, but
I
I'm
feel
like, we
like
have to
really
find the joy. I was like, we were just talking about this on Dumpster Fire, how they're doing the debates, and I was like, I can't wait. This is what Dumpster Fire was made for.
This is what Dumpster Fire was made for. 2024 is like literally Dumpster Fire at perfection.
Yes.
No, I should
love
go
you.
and head out, but this has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with the baby number 2.
Thank you.
Where can we find you in your book?
Where can we find you? Me?
You. Online, anywhere, anything you want to promote.
Oh, thefreepress.com.
The
and
book.
then click on TGIF, and then also buy Morning After the Revolution. And it's 95% of it is honestly just discussion of whether diaper wipes should be warmed or not. So it's a beautiful book. You should all buy.
It is. I love you. Thank you.
You're the best. Come hang out in LA.
Oh, we will. We'll be back.
Okay, good.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.